already talked a lot about Superstar Season 2 on this channel. It's been almost a year since it came out, and with the new members about to be announced, and having ruminated on my thoughts since it ended, I think it's the perfect time to talk about what I feel really hurt the season overall. I've already talked about the finale, but to sum it up, for all the problems it had, I think the worst thing it did was highlight the overall issues with the season. Plotlines that felt underwhelming or undeveloped, characters being pushed into the background, things feeling like they didn't matter because they were so small and insignificant screen time wise, especially when stuff that did get focused on just outright didn't go anywhere. It just kind of embodied all of it. I think the biggest issue now is that Season 2 tried to continue the writing style of Season 1, not accounting for the fact that almost doubling the main cast, outright doubling it if you count wine, just means that can't work. Season 1 only had 5 main characters. It's not perfect. There are issues and a lot that could have been executed better. Sunny Passion are incredibly underdeveloped, and that leads to Liella losing to them in the finale, despite being, I'd argue, the right choice thematically and story-wise, feeling incredibly anticlimactic and underwhelming. There's also things like the school closing plot being brushed under the rug, or Ren not getting much focus after joining the group, but personally I think overall it utilizes its main cast well. Last year, when the new Liella members were announced, I was in the middle of working on a video talking about Kanan and Chisato's arcs in Season 1, and their handling as characters, specifically how their stories intertwine and build on each other perfectly. One of the reasons I had to scrap it was because in it I discussed how it was notable they were the only Liella members with a pre-established relationship. Typically in Love Live, all the characters know at least one other member before the events of the series. For instance, in School Idol Project, Honoka, Umi, and Kotori are childhood friends, Nozomi and Ellie are on the student council together and have been friends since they started high school, and Hanyo and Rin are also childhood friends. Only Nico and Maki have no connections to the others prior to episode 1, which plays into their characters. It's similar in Sunshine, where only Riko, the just-moved-to-the-suburbs city girl, is the only one with no pre-established connections to the other members. In Niji, there are no exceptions, period, and everyone knew someone prior to the events of the series. This isn't a bad thing at all. When you have 9+ main characters, it's outright necessary because it means you don't have to spend as much time introducing and building dynamics. Superstar, however, only had 5 characters, so it had more room to slowly build these dynamics. Ren, Kuku, and Sumire have no pre-established connections to the other girls prior to episode 1. Only Chisato and Kanan knew each other at all, let alone grew up as close friends. I think this is important for the story thematically. Superstar Season 1 is a story about 5 girls broken by events in their past, who, through finding each other and helping one another overcome their baggage, find the strength to keep moving forward and to create a future together. This is the reason, in spite of Sunny Passion's victory in the finale feeling so underwhelming and unearned due to their lack of presence as characters, I think it was still the perfect route for the story to go. Again, even if execution could have been better. By episode 12, the girls have worked through their pain, found each other, and grown together. Where in the past their setbacks broke them, this time, even when upset and understandably crushed, they know they're not facing their failures alone anymore. And because of that, they're able to resolve to keep moving forward and not let the loss stop them. The season literally ends with a new beginning, both a new year and new semester, and the girls getting ready to keep practicing and improving. In the dub, the season outright ends with them all cheering that
the future is ours to make!
Cheesy? Totally. Absolutely perfect? To me at least, 100%. Even though Kuku never gets her own dedicated focus episode in the season, every character gets to play major roles in a lot of the episodes. Kanan is obvious, being the main character. Chisato gets 5 and 6 as focus episodes, and as Kanan's best friend, appears frequently to support her before and after joining, and gets meaningful scenes with both Ren and Kuku in separate episodes. Kuku plays major roles in the first 3 episodes, and episode 10. and has prominent, memorable roles in basically every other episode. Her and Sumire get a big arc that basically goes throughout the entire season, where they go from hating each other to growing to overcome their flaws that bring them into conflict, and start becoming close friends by the end. Something a show with a cast the size of those in previous Love Lives wouldn't have had time to develop. Even Ren, who doesn't get to do much after joining, which is something I've criticized in the past, has prominent appearances throughout the first half of the show, 2 episodes dedicated to her, and at least gets memorable moments in episodes 9 and 11. This is all only possible with a smaller cast. For one thing, when your main cast is smaller, you get to use them more. You have to. Roles that could be filled by anyone are typically going to be filled by one of about 3 or 4 characters, rather than 7 or 8. Kanan, Cuckoo, and Chisato spend a lot of time together, to the point of practically becoming the typical main trio by the end of the season. Partially because, say, Kanan and Chisato are talking, and another character is needed for one reason or another, or Sumire and Cuckoo are bickering and another character is needed to comment, there's only so many characters that are going to be filling that role. The original Yellow Girls are so interesting to me, partially because at the start, they're all completely not friends, barring Kanan and Chisato, of course. They don't know each other, and by the end of the seasons, they don't feel as close as the other groups do. But we're seeing them get there, and that's interesting. Despite the season covering a greater amount of time than usual for Love Live, relationships were building slower, and I love that. Not everyone did, and I completely get that and respect it. Part of Nuji's appeal for a lot of people is they feel like one big club that are all already chill with each other, which, again, I get the appeal in. That's why I think having Superstar and Nuji run alongside each other, while also having these different approaches, was a good idea at the start. Different appeals, different things they can explore. That's always a good thing, even if I end up preferring certain things more. But that's why Season 2 adding 4 new characters and introducing wine was such a bad decision in my eyes. Even beyond losing some of the uniqueness in the format, now there's a big cast again. You need to focus on other characters to try and give everyone screen time. And they try to, but it inevitably fell flat and hurt basically everything. I think the biggest example I can give on how this change basically doomed a lot of this season's writing from the start is by comparing episode 6 of season 1 to episode 6 of season 2. Both are part of a 2-parter involving a character joining. In the former, Chisato and Kanan are the main characters, and Ren plays a major supporting, basically main role. One of her most important and best in the show, I might add, for reasons I've gone into in the past. Because it's only Cuckoo and Sumire left out of the main plot, they're able to get a couple scenes with each other, Sunny Passion, or Kanan that are memorable. Stuff like Sumire genuinely helping Cuckoo cook, and Cuckoo not wanting to take credit, even when Sumire is trying to give it to her, and believing Sumire is being condescending or trying to upstage her when she's actually just trying to help, end up being important in establishing their conflict that will come now ahead in episode 10. It's not the main thing in the episode, and only gets a couple scenes, but because of the small cast, there's enough room to give it enough screen time to leave an impact, and it feels like it's something that matters. Meanwhile, in the latter episode, on paper, Natsume is the main character. It's the episode where she joins, after all. With the first years separate from the second years for their training camp, you would expect them to fill the supporting roles. They all get scenes, most notably Kineko getting a couple with Natsume, seemingly setting her up to be in a role like Kanan was for Chisato in Season 1, Episode 6, where she encourages Natsume, helps her through her issues, and gets her to join. But then, because we can't just focus on the first years, we need everyone to appear because all 9 girls are meant to be main characters, we get what's seemingly a subplot where Kanan is worried about letting them go on their own and worrying they've done something wrong to push them away. In a show of her growth from last season and her maturity in her new role as club president, Chisato comforts her, comparing what the first years are doing to her entering the contest on her own last year. They'll support them and encourage them, but it's good to let them grow on their own and challenge themselves. Ren, Cuckoo, and Sumire get some token lines here as well, but because there's so much going on, they can't really say or contribute much since they don't fit the plot and there's no time for them to do anything else. Then after that, Kanan decides to go check on the first years, and in what's probably the most controversial moment in the season before the finale, ends up being the one to convince Natsume to join. On paper, I see what they might have been going for, and I actually don't hate this idea like a lot of people do. Having a story about Kana and Chisato growing into their roles as club moms is a fun idea, and I think this is a clever way to do it. In Season 1, Chisato learns the importance of letting others support her, and that she doesn't have to prove herself to them or do things all on her own. But she also still understands the importance of pushing herself or others out of her or their comfort zones. But doing so is important to grow. That's what makes her fit the role of club president so well. Kanan, meanwhile, is a kind girl with a big heart. She's great at emotional support, and one-on-one is really good at seeing through others' attempts at hiding themselves, and through relating to them with their own experiences, is great at helping them find what they need to chase their dreams and move forward. But she's also terrible at pushing herself, and doesn't ever want to push others as a result. And she's not good at dealing with stress in a group situation. We saw in episode 11 of season 1, Chisato had to be the one to push her to face her past so she could move forward from it. And in this episode, we see how Chisato needs to take her outside where she can think on her own without the others there, so she can get her thoughts together when she's stressed about the first years. We even later see in episode 9 of the season that during a group argument, Kanan completely lets emotion take over, and rather than seeing through someone and understanding what's behind their actions like she normally would, she just goes to hit Sumire. Having Chisato give the first years a harder training regimen, pushing them but also encouraging them by saying she knows they're capable of handling it, while Kanan goes to provide emotional support, helping Natsume realize she is capable of great things and can follow her dreams, sharing how she knows what it's like to have them crushed, but knows now it's possible to move forward, is an amazing concept. It builds on Season 1's themes and arcs, and does something I really wanted to see with new members even before it was actually announced we were getting any. Since the original 5, Kanan and Chisato especially, have faced their pasts and grown together, they're now in a better position to help other younger girls do the same. The concept here is genuinely perfect in my eye. The execution, on the other hand, leaves a lot to be desired, and that's partially because it's simply trying to juggle too much. If it was just Natsume and Kineko training, and Kanan and Chisato in a sort of B-plot that ends up coming together with theirs, I think it would have allowed for everything to be fleshed out more. Kineko feels like she's so wasted here because the episode sets up her helping Natsume, but she never gets to deliver, and just drops from the story entirely after the scene on the porch. Which stings even more in hindsight because this episode was basically her last major role in the season, only halfway in. It feels like Kanan comes out of nowhere because she only really got a single scene prior to intersecting with the main plot. A lot of time that could have been given to fleshing out Kineko and Natsume's dynamic, or giving Kanan and Chisato more of a role in the story, is instead devoted to trying to make sure Cuckoo, Sumire, Ren, Shiki, and Mei, all of whom have no real place in this story, get screen time because they're main characters too. Need to remind people they exist so they'll go buy concert tickets and albums. And when you combine that with the fact that there's an insert song at the end of this episode taking up like 3 minutes, everything is really, really crushed. Unlike Season 1 Episode 6, which had 3 main characters in its story, counting Ren, who all contribute something meaningful, and only 2 characters that needed something else to do, this one basically has 4 mains, 3 of whom, Kanan, Chisato, and Kineko, don't even feel fully integrated into the story properly because they're all fighting for screen time, and 5 other characters that need other things to do. No wonder the story buckled under the weight of all this. Season 2 of Superstar is filled with stuff like this. I enjoy a lot of episodes and love all these characters, including the new ones, even Wine, but it rarely feels like anyone is able to get adequate screen time. Chisato in particular, I feel like does have a lot of meaningful roles and shows her development from the first season really well. I'd argue she's only second to Sumire in that regard. But because there's so much to cover, her roles never get any time to breathe and always end up feeling like footnotes in episodes focused on other things. Her becoming club president easily could have been its own episode, but because there's so much going on this season, it's just shoved into Shiki and Mei's episode with only a couple scenes to show for it. Having a plot point like this shared in another episode isn't inherently a bad idea. Episode 7 of Season 1 had the first half primarily being about the student council president election, and the second half the group trying to figure out Brent's deal, but the episode had a good amount of time devoted to both, and all 5 characters were involved in both plots, and they intersected well, so neither felt like footnotes. In instances like Chisato becoming club president, it only gets 2 or so scenes in an episode, entirely about something else. Her constantly getting overshadowed just makes it feel like all she is the circle gag, because it's the only thing that sticks out when everything else is lost in the shuffle. And again, I'd still argue she's one of the better used characters. There are tons of plots that end up underwhelming and underdeveloped because of the need to give so many characters screen time. Sumire's worry about Cuckoo potentially having to leave and trying to get Cuckoo to talk about it, causing Cuckoo to be increasingly harsh to her. Amazing. Fitting. Really great expansion on Season 1, and a good challenge to their growing friendship. The climax episode is amazing as well. I've basically spent an entire video talking about why I think so. But because there's so much else to cover, we get a couple of very small scenes and moments with it before the episode that deals with it. And almost all the rest of their screen time together is the same gag of Cuckoo is mean to Sumire. Sumire points out she hasn't done anything. So for a lot of people, it just feels unearned and like Cuckoo's being an asshole again. Since we don't get any time to focus on doing anything else, it's lost in the sea of other tiny scenes they get and is not as distinguishable like it should be. Because there are significant moments to their arc this season. We should be able to see Cuckoo getting more and more hostile towards Sumire when she's trying to get her to talk, or at least think about what might happen, but no time for that, so there's just a couple of small examples. Sunny Passion gets upstaged by the new rival, creating an even bigger threat for Liella to face, which I'd argue is fitting and a good chance to try and redeem them just winning off screen last time. Sunny Passion serve as something of mentors to Liella. They're the mature senior group that the younger Liella girls aspire to be like. Having them get beaten by the new rival, putting more pressure on Liella, who still aren't even sure if they're at Sunny Passion's level yet, is a great setup and pretty standard story structure stuff. But then it happens off screen and Sunny Passion get like 2, maybe 3 scenes in the entire season. Wine serves as a potentially interesting foil to Kanon, that they hint after her first performance could tempt Kanon with the idea she could be more successful on her own. She's an incredibly successful middle school solo singer, basically what Kanon could have been without her anxiety holding her back, but also without any of her heart. I love it. It's a good dynamic, and honestly the single best rival character setup in the franchise. Saint Snow beat her as a rival group overall, and I'd say Lei as a character is more interesting right now, but I think as specifically a rival character, Wine was so interesting because she's such a good foil to Kanon in concept. I love the idea so much, but then she disappears for almost 5 episodes after her debut, and it's all just kind of wasted and feels underwhelming by the time she shows back up. I really think either Natsume or Shiki and Mei, since they're a duo, should have been saved for season 3 to join the club as first years then alongside Wine. The fact alone they wouldn't need 6 episodes to reestablish the group would give Kineko more time to shine, since, like I said, she kinda just drops off in relevancy entirely after episode 6. Give whoever they kept more time to shine. Natsume and Shiki, as is, are basically demoted to gag characters right after they join. Shiki in particular, while I absolutely love her, feels more like part of Mei's character than her own character a lot of the time. And it'd give the other existing characters and Wine more screen time and room to breathe. Maybe we could have actually had the time to see Sunny Passion finally perform, because God, they didn't fix that, and it's still so weird. I mentioned earlier, I liked how the group's dynamic was building slowly in Season 1. But in Season 2, I fully believe it became a serious hindrance because there just wasn't enough time to actually follow up on that. So instead, they just pretend they did. It'd be easier to make the cast feel closer and not segmented like they still do if they weren't trying to build dynamics from the ground up for 9 characters. In episode 11, after the group are announced winners, effectively overcoming the roadblock that stopped them last season, they all hug. Not as a group, mind you. Kana and Sato do, Natsume and Shiki and Mei do, Kiki and Sumire do, and Kiniko and Ren are just kind of close to everyone. Even the show is aware of how segmented the cast feels. Instead of trying to build on the existing cast with maybe 1 or 2 additions, they had to do 9 main characters again. Arguably 10 since wine was important, and while it hasn't been announced yet at the time of writing this and posting this, wine is pretty obviously going to be in Liela in some form. So we got a rushed mess where, despite having a lot of good moments in episodes, feels like most of the characters barely got to do anything this season. Even in cases where that isn't true, it still feels that way because there's so much that needs to be done. It's lost in the shuffle and basically relegated to the background more often than not. That's Superstar Season 2's biggest problem. The ending is dumb. I've talked about that. But they likely wouldn't have even had time to build up to it and flesh it out, so it just highlights how it feels like nothing in this season really mattered. There were some great stories and arcs, and a lot with serious potential, but because they tried to make a show where we've seen them work with a smaller cast and use that to build things slower, suddenly work with the traditional large Love Live cast without drastically changing the writing style to accommodate, it was ultimately doomed to fail.